Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. My turn. Let's see, announcements. Tomorrow night at 6:30 we have a budget meeting. So stewards, that'll be you. Then there's something going on Friday night. Dalton, you want to talk about that?
Everybody needs to be there at 6 o'clock. You have to be there at 6 to register, and it don't start until 7. But it'll last until 3 o'clock. And are all y'all leaving early, or is it just still? I don't know if we are or not. Okay. Well, if not, I need y'all to help us out.
Okay, so be at the campground. Y'all listen up. Be at the campground at 6 o'clock Friday evening, and it continues through to 3 o'clock Saturday. The following Saturday is the Layman's Fellowship at the campground. That's on April the 13th at 3 o'clock. If you are planning to go, I need to know tonight so that we can let Jeff know how many are who's going, because the meal will be catered, and so he needs to have an exact count to make sure that we have adequate food. So if you are planning to go, please let me know tonight so that I can get word to Jeff. Sunday night. What's happening Sunday night? Joyce Igo will be here at 6 o'clock. And we will have finger foods afterwards. So Joyce Igo at 6, and we'll have finger foods afterwards. Board meeting is supposed to be Sunday night. Obviously, we can't do it at normal time. So I'm going to give you two options. So board members that are here, I need your input. We can do it Monday at 6:30, or we can move it up to 4:30 Sunday. Which would you prefer? 4:30 Sunday? I'll be pushing it now because we got Joyce here too. So okay. 4:30 Sunday it is. Let's see, any other announcements? I think I got everything on. Okay, do we have any prayer requests?
My cousin Darren has not got the results back. They were supposed to get them last week. So we don't know why they just, hadn't received the results yet. Darren Appleby and Kevin Smith family put their decisions on mission field.
Okay. Let's see, I think, yeah, she's on there. Okay. Also an announcement and prayer request, and I'll just read the post here. Little Miss Olivia Elaine Brown made her entrance into the world this morning at 10:38. She was 7 pounds, 12 ounces, and 20.5 inches long. So, congratulations to Jessica and Sydney, and but also let's be in prayer for Jessica and Olivia. I said and Elaine, yeah, and Sydney. Right, Josh Cawthorn.
And Tracy has made it to rehab as of yesterday,
Monday. And Buck Daly? Okay.
No, brother's not going yet.
Okay. All right. Keith, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Lord, we thank you this day, Father. We just thank you for the many blessings you've given us, Father. We thank you for allowing us to be in your house this evening, Father. Lord, just bless the ones on our prayer list, Father. You know their needs, Father. Just help them and guide them and just give them comfort, Father. And Lord, just go with us as we go into the service, Father. We'll be totally content to what the preacher has to say to us, Father. For we ask all these things in your humble name.
Amen. All right, let's walk to class.
I was just gonna see if y'all was kidding.
She's straightening you out? All right. So what all happened after the resurrection? We know that the ladies went down to the tomb and found it empty. They saw the angels, and Mary saw Jesus and spoke to him. But let's pick up from there. What was the next event that was recorded that happened actually that same day?
Told him to go somewhere and they met him on the way. Is that right?
Say that again.
Didn't he tell the disciples to go somewhere and he met them on the road and talked to them? And they didn't know him?
He didn't tell them to go, no. But they went. They were on the road to Emmaus. Two disciples. We're not sure exactly who. Perhaps Peter was one of them. Actually, I think Luke does name Simon, but he doesn't specify which Simon. What is the significance of that event? Why is it recorded? What's important there for us?
That Jesus was alive?
Okay, it's part of it. They didn't recognize him at first. No, that's not what I'm looking for. A little bit later, but what did he do as they were walking? Well, at first he pretended as though he didn't know what was going on, and they're like, "You the only person in Jerusalem that doesn't know what all happened?" And then he said, "Come on, guys. What are you so slow? Is it taking you so long? What's the problem here? Why don't you understand that everything that happened had to happen in order to fulfill prophecy?" And so beginning with the prophets, with Moses and the prophets, he explained the scripture to them as to the prophecies of why everything had to happen the way that it did. Now, that's important because it's a reminder to us that the Old Testament sets up for the New Testament. And without the Old Testament, you don't have the New Testament. It's impossible to understand the New Testament without the Old Testament. And so Jesus explains all of that to them. They get to the house where they're going, and when they go in, Jesus revealed himself to them, allowed them to see him for who he was, then he disappeared. The next event is the same night, because those two disciples hurried back to Jerusalem and said, "Hey guys, Jesus appeared to us. He really is alive." And the way that it's recorded, it says they were in the upper room, or they were in this room, but there was one missing. Who was not there? Thomas. We've nicknamed him Thomas the Doubter. So Jesus appeared to the disciples. Now, they were afraid of the religious leaders, and so they had the room closed up. All the doors were closed and locked so that nobody could get in. And suddenly, standing in the midst of them is Jesus. Now, how would you feel if you're in a room all locked up, all closed up, and suddenly somebody, Jesus, appears right in front of you? We'd probably be like Wendy Bagwell. Remember that story? Where's the back door? They don't have one. We'll reckon where they want one because he's about to go through the back door. We would have been making back doors, right? And Jesus tried to calm them down and said, hey, it's me, look at my hands. And then he said, give me something to eat. Because they're thinking, okay, this is an apparition, this is a ghost, right? And so they gave him something to eat, and he ate it. And they realized he really is alive. Again, significant. One of the reasons of the significance of this is to prove the fact, one, that Jesus really did come back to life, that he really was raised from the dead. And that also goes towards proving that he is the Son of God. Well, the disciples tell Thomas what happened, and Thomas said what? Not just saw it. Said until I put my hand my hands in his hands and put my hand in his side where the spear was thrust in. He said, I'm not going to believe it. And so a little bit later on, I think it's 8 days or so later on, the disciples are again gathered together, again in a closed up room, locked up, and again Jesus appears to them. This time Thomas is there. And Jesus calls Thomas out and says, okay, Thomas, here are my hands. Here's my side. Come check it out. And Thomas did what? My Jesus, my Lord, my God. He recognizes him as Jesus. And Jesus said, it's good that you were convinced by seeing me without having to touch me. He said, blessed are those who will believe in me and without having seen. Referring, of course, to us. Because we haven't seen Jesus, but we have these records. And these are historical records that prove who Jesus is and that Jesus really was raised from the dead. Now, to go back to that for just a second, one of the statements that you may hear some say is that Jesus really didn't die on the cross. Now, let me ask you this question. What Roman soldier would have been left alive that day for allowing a prisoner to be crucified and not die on the cross? None. Because if they didn't make sure that all of the prisoners were dead, they would take their place. And I can assure you that there was no Roman soldier that wanted to be on that cross. And so they made sure that they were all dead. But the fact that the soldier thrust the spear into his side is proof enough that Jesus really was dead. Now they're proving that he really was alive. The next event that is significant is one that takes place a few days later. There are several disciples, among them Peter, who were getting a little let's say frustrated, a little just uncertain, not real sure what's next. What's the next step? What do we do now? And so they did the one thing that they knew best. They went fishing. Now, they didn't go out with a rod and reel and sit on the pier fishing. That's not how they fished. They were fishermen by profession, by trade. And so they took their boats out and they cast their nets out, and all night they fished. And the next morning, the only thing they had to show that they had fished all night were aching muscles and hurting backs. They didn't catch anything. As their boats are coming in, they look out to the beach, and they see someone standing there on the beach. And he's got a little fire going. And he calls out to them, "What did you catch?" "It was a slow night. We didn't catch anything." "Cast your nets on the other side." Now, stop and think for a moment. These are professional fishermen. Don't you think they know how to fish? Don't you think they know what they're doing? And this person that at first they don't recognize, that they don't have any idea who it is, tells them to throw their nets on the other side. How do you think they felt? But the thing that's amazing to me is this. They did what they were asked to do. They cast their nets on the other side. And when they did, they hauled in a catch. You remember how many fish they caught? 153 fish. And their nets didn't break, which implies that that was a really big catch for them. Well, the disciple whom Jesus loved, do y'all know who that is? John. John was on the boat, and he looked at Peter and said, "Peter, that's Jesus." And Peter said, "You're right, I think it is." And so he grabbed his coat and jumped into the water and swam to shore. "Oh, hey guys, y'all bring the boats on in. I'm going to see Jesus." So they get to the shore, and Jesus asked them how they did, and they told him. And he said, "Bring some of the fish that you just caught." So Peter went, and they dragged the net in to the shore, pulled in the 153 large fish, and then Jesus said, "Now come and have some breakfast." None of the disciples dared to ask, "Who are you?" because they knew who it was. So Jesus served them the bread and the fish. Now let's stop here for just a second. What's significant about this event? When Jesus called the disciples from the boats to begin with, what did he tell them? What was the call that he gave to them? "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." In this moment of uncertainty and not sure exactly what's next, Jesus showed them that the boats are not where they need to be. That fishing on the sea is not the type of fishing for them, because they fished all night, didn't catch anything. And when Jesus told them to cast their nets on the other side, they hauled in the catch. And Jesus was showing them that their job, their mission is not catching fish from the water, but fishers of men. Now, the next event that takes place immediately is one of the most significant events. They just had breakfast. The disciples are sitting around, and Jesus looked at Peter. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord. You know I love you. Feed my lambs. Then he looked at Peter again and said, Peter, do you love me more than these? More than what? What do you think he's asking? More than what? More than these? Life itself. The life that you know, the fishing, your friends, everything about what's going on right now. Yes, Lord, Peter replied, you know I love you. Feed my lambs. Then Jesus repeated the question again. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. Now, there's some interesting things in this statement, but the main thing, the primary thing that I want you to think about tonight is this. Let's go back about 2 weeks. The night before Jesus was crucified. What did Peter do? He denied Jesus 3 times. 3 times Jesus asked him, do you love me? Do we see the reconciliation that Jesus is offering to Peter here? That he's reaching out to him and he's showing him, Peter, I knew what you were going to do. And I knew that you were going to reject me, that you were going to deny me. And that's okay. Because I forgive you. And I want you to be my disciple. And so, by asking Peter these questions these 3 times, he is emphasizing the fact of reconciliation. Now, the 3rd time, it says Peter was really upset. Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question the 3rd time. And Jesus, you know everything. You know that I love you. Then feed my sheep, he said. Now, there's also some interesting nuances in the word that's used here. Or I should say words. But especially in the word love. Do you love me? Now, English, we really lose it in the English here because we just have the one English word love. But in the Greek, there are 2 different Greek words that are used when Jesus asks, do you love me? 2 times he asked Peter, if you love me, using the word agapao, or the agape love. You perhaps have heard that. This is the love it's the deepest form of love. It's the form of love that we have between man and God. It's the love that's defined or described in a marital relationship between a husband and a wife. When we talk about the husband and wife loving each other, that's the Greek word agapao that's used those first 2 times. What's interesting is the 3rd time, Jesus reverts to the Greek word phileo. Now, phileo, who knows what Philadelphia means? The city of brotherly love. It's made up of 2 Greek words, phileo and adelphos. Adelphos is brother, and phileo is love. And it's the brotherly love is kind of the idea when we talk about the phileo type of love. It's not the high form of love that agapao is, but it's still that word that talks about the relationship with each other. So think of it this way. When Jesus is asking the first two times, Peter, do you love me? Do you love God? Do you love me as the Son of God? Do you love me with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength? And then the third time, Peter, do you love your neighbor as yourself? Do we see the relationship that Jesus is introducing here? So the first time, it's just asking the question. The second time, he's emphasizing his love for God. And then the third time, he's emphasizing that love extends out as well. And I'm not going to get into the sheep and the lambs, but also two different words that are used there, which they do translate in the English as well. But the significance of this event for Peter is the restoration, the reconciliation that Jesus gives to him. And Peter recognizes that even though he turned away from him that night, and even though he denied him, that Jesus was welcoming him back. And he's showing us that, there are times when maybe we kind of like Peter do something stupid. Maybe we go off just not really thinking about it. Maybe we say things and do things that we don't really intend, and we're not really thinking about it. And we go and we do these things, and then afterwards we have the remorse, and we have the guilt, and the I'm worthless. What good is it? Why should I keep going? God's not going to forgive me for this. Look at what Jesus did for Peter. And that's the reminder to us as well that he loves us. When Peter rejected Jesus that night, Jesus still went to the cross to die for Peter. Think about it. He died on the cross for Peter, knowing that Peter had rejected him, but also knowing that in 2 weeks, Peter is going to be restored. Remember, he's the Son of God. He knows these things. And the same is true for us. When we feel as though we have turned our backs on him, or that we have rejected him just like Peter, we have the same promise that Jesus offers restoration to us as well. And he wants us to be restored into fellowship with him so that we can know him as Lord and Savior. The next event, I think I'll save for next week. Any questions, any comments?
Yeah, I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
John is the disciple that Jesus loved, right?
In John's words,
John's word.
yes.
So in the book of John, he says Peter, they go into the tomb, he says Peter and the other disciple that Jesus loved.
Mm-hmm.
He says that more than once.
We believe that he was referring to himself there as well.
Well, I agree with that.
Mhm.
Back up. See, and when I was in high school, we had a teacher, you wrote an essay, she took one off every time you used I.
Right.
So John's options were I, Peter and I, or, talk of herself in third person or something else, It's just I the way he says that, the other disciple.
Right. Peter and the other disciples started out for the tomb. They were both running. Yeah. Yeah. When in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus is betrayed, John is there as well. And he also speaks of himself because he's the one whose tunic was taken off, and he ran away naked from the crowd there that night. But again, he doesn't name himself, but it's clear that he is talking about himself. Now, John is a young man at this point. Not sure exactly how old, but probably in his 20s. Because we know that he lived to be, I think it's around 90 or something like that. And,
Oh, he outran Peter to him.
right. John is also the only disciple who died of natural causes. All the other disciples were martyred.
But John was the only one at the cross, right? Because Jesus said,
Right.
she's your,
He was there with Mary. Mm-hmm.
take care of her. She's your mother.
I like too how John closes the gospel. He said Jesus also did many other things. If they were all written down, I suppose the whole world could not contain the books that would be written. And just an interesting summary that he gives there. All right, if all hearts and minds are free, let's stand and